The Daily Code Snippet. How to adjust color contrast for accessibility. In addition to the items reviewed in the recap, color and contrast are an important issue to discuss when considering accessibility. Those with visual disabilities have to be accommodated when perceiving content on your page. Contrast is a measure of the difference between the luminance or brightness between two colors. It is expressed as a ratio ranging from 1:1, or white on white, to 21:1, or black on white. For the level AA required by the WCAG, a contrast ratio of at least 4.5:1 is desired, except for large text and graphics, which need a ratio of 3.1. Large text is defined as 18 points or larger or 14 points or larger if the text has a bold weight, which corresponds to the numerical value of 700. If a text or an image is purely decorative and has no significance to the content, it has no contrast requirement. Similarly, text as part of a logo or brand has no contrast requirement. Some examples of color combinations that have a minimum of 4.5:1 contrast are gray, hexadecimal code 767676 on white, hexadecimal code FFFFFF, red, hexadecimal code E60000 on yellow, hexadecimal code FFFF47. This is a minimum requirement, so you may not find some of the color combinations appealing. Text over gradients also need to be compliant, and the recommendation is to test the contrast requirements on the areas of lowest contrast. Level AAA compliance is not yet required by common standards, but will probably be a future requirement and is more stringent. So the contrast ratio required is 7:1 for normal text and 4.5:1 for large text. Today we will look at adjusting color contrast in practice by analyzing a site for accessibility issues and remediating the color contrast problems we find. We will use the Web Access Pro Chrome extension to audit the site for accessibility errors and guide our corrections. So for the past month we've been talking about accessibility, and I'm going to introduce you to a tool that we've been developing here to help with determining whether a website is accessible and how we can go about remediating the code in order to help our clients have websites that are compliant with the ADA laws. And so the name of the tool is Web Access Pro, and this is the Chrome browser, and it is an extension that is used as a Chrome extension. And when loaded into Chrome, it can toggle on and off to basically display a summary of what errors are on the site and what needs to be fixed in order to make the site more compliant with the current guidelines for accessibility. As you see, it shows a summary of the different errors that are there, as well as what features are actually good. It will also give you a more detailed explanation of what the issues are, and it will let you know whether the element can be viewed or if it's something that's not visible but is something that needs to be looked at in the code. And then this tab will show you structural elements, just give you a basic understanding of what is here. So we have a header, we have H1, we have a navigation. One of the main issues on this site, which is one issue that we need to discuss, is considered a serious ADA issue, is color contrast. Because for those with low vision, you need to have adequate color contrast for people to be able to see your text. So in this case, the primary color for the site, this gray, does not have enough color contrast as compared to the white background. And this tool is able to let you know, for instance, that the color contrast has a value of 4.38, which is considered to be too low, but we want something that's 4.5. So what we would need to do is find out what gray we can replace this color with in order to improve the color contrast of our site. So we can go now to Adobe Color, which has recently, probably in the last year or two, included color contrast tools for you to actually check your colors to determine whether they have adequate color contrast. So we know that the foreground color is this gray color, A6, A6, A6. And our background color is, of course, FFF, FFF, which is white. Ultimately, what we are seeing is that it's failing. And it's failing at our, we can actually select what level we want to check at. And it's failing at, AAA as well as AA. Right now, AA is the current standard, but we will probably be moving to AAA at some point. So that's something to keep in mind. And although primarily we're looking at color contrast, there's also an option to look at what colors are safe for those with color blindness. So that's another issue that you can check with these accessibility tools. So going back to color contrast, so we can see if we can make this better by adding more gray to see if we can get to a color contrast that passes. So we would have to go to this color, 757575, to reach a passing grade for regular text, large text, as well as graphic components. So, and this is at the AA level. We can also check and see if it passes AAA, and it fails for regular text, but it is enough for large and graphic components, so we would not be able to pass AAA. We would maybe want to apply some of their contrast suggestions to get to that. So if we went to this one, we see it still doesn't pass AAA. Let's try this one. So in order to pass to AAA standards, we would have to apply this kind of almost much darker color than what we are currently using. So we would have to go to 575757 to reach enough color contrast to pass to AAA. Now, like I said, we would have to kind of discuss this with the client. AAA is not the current standard, so they may be fine with something that passes AA. And that might be more aesthetically closer to what the client is looking for. So that would be a discussion that we would have to have with the client, because while passing AAA is a future standard, it's not the current standard. And they may be okay with this point where it passes to large text and graphic components, but not regular text. So what we have done here is gone to the FTP to basically open up the code that goes to control the color in the website we were just looking at. And what I'm doing is going to our CSS file, and we have two main CSS files in this project. One is for the individual project pages, and one is for the global styles, and that governs not only the index page, but also some of the individual project pages. So what we would want to do is find that color and change it out with the color that we found on our color contrast checker that has more contrast. And so we use the find feature in our code editor, this is BB Edit, to find the color that we want, and then we're going to change it to this other color that we would rather replace it to, and we're going to replace all. And we're going to do the same thing in this project folder. And we're going to save both. And by editing directly in the FTP, we're basically making a live change. So and it's pulling up all the files that are live, running these websites online. And what I've done is I've duplicated the website into another version that's the accessible version. So this way I'm not changing the code of the original website. I'm just changing the code on a copy of the website because I want to test my changes first before deploying them to the real website. So this gives me a way to look at the changes live, edit the code without endangering the original code, like, you know, because anytime you're working with the code, you might break something and you don't want to break something on a live site. So we've copied the code and we are basically looking at the code through the FTP and editing it. The CSS files are here in the CSS file. Now that we've done that, we've made the changes, we've saved our file, we can go back now to the website and what we may need to do also is clear our cache because we've made a change and it may be pulling up, rather than the current site, a cached version of the site that isn't going to have our changes live. So we want to make sure we've done that. And you can already see that this is darker, but there are areas where we still see the lighter color. So we're probably going to have to look at what wasn't changed, because sometimes when you replace, you're not picking up all the instances of that color. We are still seeing instances of the 165. And we need to find out where we are still seeing this A6, so that we can change it out to our new color. But you can kind of see the darker version being used in other areas. Like this is darker. So we've fixed it in our navigation. We've fixed it in our description in an individual product page. But let's go down to the bottom and see. We're still seeing a relatively lighter color here. And we have to check if this is a different color, gray, or if this is the one that we searched for. And then if we go back, we have to check also these elements, these links. So it may be the link color needs to be changed as well in a separate place. And these still look a bit lighter. So is there another spot where it didn't pick up the lighter color, or if this is a different gray that we need to figure out what we need to find. So also we look at, if we look at the color contrast issues, we need to find .title. We need to check this color here as to whether it is sufficient. And this is the red color, and we're finding that it also needs remediation. We can go back to our AA standard and see. So it actually passes for large and graphic, but not AA. So it may not need much remediation. So this color passes AA. and it fails AAA. So we have to get pretty dark. So this may be an issue with our client to change it to this, to pass AAA, because this is a much darker red than what they're using currently. So I think what I would do in this case is, again, have a discussion, but for the purposes of our demonstration, I'm not going to change it to the AAA standard. I'm going to keep it with the AA standard, because it is a much more drastic change. So we would need to change the red color ED1C24 to this red color, which is of adequate contrast for AA. So again, we're going to do a search for that. So we've identified the colors that fail level AA compliance and are replacing them in our code. Next, we will recheck the website using the Web Access Pro tool after cleaning up our code and double checking our code adjustments. So now we have gone through the code and found all the instances of those two colors, the A6, 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 and changed it to 57, 57, 57, and also added this E81, C23 instead of ED1, C24 for the red. And now that we've cleared the cache and turned on the Chrome extension again, the Web Access Pro, to check our site for errors, we notice now that we no longer have contrast color errors coming up. So we've managed to fix the site from the color contrast standpoint. And so if we look at the site now, you can see that this is a bit darker than it was before, as well as this. But what we have lost is the difference between the headers and these information, because they're too close now in gray to show a difference. So one thing we may want to do now is change those header colors from that dark gray color into black. And that way we retain some contrast between the regular text and these headers, which is now lost because we've made the regular color much darker in gray to be enough color contrast. So this is where kind of design sometimes meets issues with making your site accessible, because we liked the light gray in terms of its contrast with our headers that were in a dark gray. But now, because we've made that light gray a darker gray, there is no longer the visual contrast that we had before in our design. And so this is why sometimes making things accessible, we do run into difficulties with our design, because the design that we want to use, we can't, because the colors we're choosing are things that don't have enough color contrast. So these are the trade-offs when you're trying to create accessibility and making our designs open to more people. We will have to adjust the look and feel of our site in some ways, and this is where you may run into issues with your client if they were married very strongly to that light gray color. They may object to making the change. But in order to be compliant, we need to actually use a darker gray that provides enough color contrast for our viewers that may have low vision issues. So what we might want to do is go back to our code and then go look for our instances of our headers and see if we can change that color to something darker that may provide more contrast. So that would be this color 333, which is a darker gray. We see here there's also repetition. I noticed that when I was editing that there was some repetition of color that didn't need to be there. So I've been also cleaning up the code in that sense. So now if we go back to our find tool and instead search for 333, we can then change that to black. And what I'm going to do is replace all of the 333 with black. And the instances where we were missing things before was because, again, it's very to the letter when I search. So I was searching for 333 with a semicolon after and replacing it. But I was missing instances where it was hashtag 333 without a semicolon. But what I was finding is this is a duplicate. And so it's fine that I didn't change it. I'm going to actually go through and try to delete those instances of duplicate code that are unnecessary. So we'll go ahead and look for that. So if we go through our code slowly, we will look for 333. If there's a duplicate, we will take care of it. We can also try searching for 333 without, if it becomes, the fact that I can't find it means that it doesn't exist. So that's good. So we've saved this code, and then we can do the same thing with our project CSS and see if we can find any instances, but we don't see that. So we don't have any instances to change. We'll look just in case. Yeah, so we aren't seeing any of that. But we do see there's still a couple instances of duplicate code. So whenever I see that, I'm going to clean that up. And we kind of go through our code a bit slowly so we can find the instances that we're trying to correct. And we don't see anything. So now let's go back to our website. And we're going to clear our cache again. And refresh. So we've made it black to gray, and there's still not the same level of difference that we had when we had dark gray to light gray. So it still may not be something that is enough of a change. We will have to discuss, this change with the client if it's enough. They may want to add weight to the type, maybe make it the next step up in weight to give it more gravitas. And we will find out, what is preferred in this case. And if we go to our individual clients pages, we see that it's using that same contrast. We also may want to refresh our icons as well. So you can see that the icons are still of the lighter gray color. And because these are actually brought in as images, we would have to actually go back to the image and adjust the image itself to make it darker. So that's another task in terms of color contrast. But graphical elements are not the same as text in terms of color contrast, so they aren't seeming to come up with an error on that. So we will double check, but we may want to make it more consistent in design. We're going to have to edit some of the icons that we're using that are still using that lighter gray and make it a darker gray. And afterwards, we will look at what other errors are coming up and seeing if there is something we can do to fix our code to, again, fix some of these issues that are still coming up that aren't a color contrast issue, but are other problems with the site in terms of accessibility. And it looks like a main error is to look at the use of duplicate IDs and to look at maybe ARIA marking of regions and landmarks, whether they're not that clear for someone using an assistive device, and fix that. So we're going to go through, so you would have an idea how you would go about fixing the code of a site that is currently not accessible and making it accessible, and using this tool, this Web Access Pro that we have created to help you identify issues with your site. So now you have an idea on how to remediate a website for contrast errors using the tool Web Access Pro, which is a Chrome extension under development. If you want more information, click on the link below. Presented by Designers Learn Code.